In today's video, we have several news and notes regarding the Montreal Canadiens. We're talking about some trade rumors, some waivers updates, as well as a couple of key prospects that may be signing soon as well. We'll jump into all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, today we're focusing on the Montreal Canadiens. Normally I discuss several or many teams in one video, but there was a lot going on for Montreal here that's come up between today and yesterday, so I just want to do one dedicated video. There'll be another video either later tonight or tomorrow discussing news on the rest of the league here coming up soon. There's just a lot to cover for the Habs. We had a press conference today from Marc Bergevin as well, which certainly added to some of the news items that we're going to discuss here in today's video as well. So first up, we have the news on the NHL waivers. Yesterday, we saw the Montreal Canadiens place longtime veteran and alternate captain Paul Byron on waivers. Well, we finally got the news that he has indeed cleared, so he's not going to be claimed by another NHL team. So he's still a Montreal Canadian, and that gives the Habs the opportunity to assign him to the taxi squad, which ultimately buries his contract, puts him kind of in a minor league situation. So a part of his contract will be buried, gives them some extra cap space, and will certainly help them accrue more cap space for later into the season. Now, when it comes to Byron, those guys on one-way deals, it doesn't really impact their pay any because they're still paid the same salary regardless of where they're assigned to, but it gives them much more needed cap flexibility to accrue more space and allows them to rotate some other guys into the lineup here as well, just to kind of change things up. We know that the Montreal Canadiens won their last game against the Leafs. They didn't really have a great first 40 minutes. It wasn't terrible either, but the last 20 minutes in the third periods where they won the game, scored a couple of late goals to squeak one out. So they got the victory, and they did so without Tomas Tatar, a longtime veteran, being scratched, and had some different lineup options there as well. So certainly going to create some interesting conversations. I know scratching Tatar was certainly a big headline, a big surprise for many. We know that obviously prior to that game, the Habs went on a small losing streak after starting the season and being one of the most dominant teams in the North Division, hovering around first or second between them and Toronto. They've been the top two teams in Canada so far this season, and obviously, running into a small losing streak didn't bode well. They have high expectations of Montreal, and they had some players that weren't really doing their best the last few games. Guys like Tatar and Danault actually were the main ones sticking out as kind of not playing the best, and of course they're also pending UFAs, so that kind of creates a situation where it kind of questions about their future. Then you go into the game against the Leafs without Tatar being a healthy scratch, and then they win the game, so they prove that they could play a solid game, even though, like I said, the first 40 minutes wasn't they were only down 1-0, but it wasn't bad hockey, but it wasn't their best hockey either. But they pulled out a win, and they showed they could do that without him. So obviously makes you wonder what the future holds. And I mean, Phillip Danault, of course, was reportedly to have rejected a big-time $30 million contract, 6 years at $5 million per season in the offseason as an extension. And I'm just not really sure why. Because to me, that is a more than fair contract for Danault. I know that he certainly seemed to have some concerns at season's end about where he fits in the lineup. Having guys like Suzuki and Kotkaniemi kind of surpassed him on playing more offensive lines and more offensive zone starts than he was in the 2020 bubble playoffs. And, we don't know what the future holds for him right now either. And at the same time, you have to think that the way that the rest of the team and the rest of their center icemen are playing, it's kind of making guys like Tatar and Danault become, not really expendable. But they've proven here that as much as they're good players, and they've been good players for them for a long time, and, obviously Tatar, Danault, Gallagher quite often for the longest time made up 2/3 of their top line. It just seems to be changing of a guard here. Now, those two guys are at a point right now where they're able to play well and win, despite them either not being in the lineup or not playing their best. Now, overall, I don't think Tatar's had a bad season. I think Tatar has been pretty decent. I mean, he might have had a small stretch there where he wasn't at his best, but overall, he's still producing, whereas Phillip Danault has yet to score this season. I think he's put up 6 assists. Hasn't been as strong defensively. He is a very underrated two-way center. Last season or so is kind of starting to get a little bit more recognition and a little more love as being one of the better two-way centers in the NHL, which I do agree that he can certainly be that guy. But this year, I'm not sure that he has been quite as good. But you saw that the other centers, like Suzuki especially, is getting the top forward ice time, and he's playing in all situations. And as young as he is in his ELC contract and still proving himself, he's already kind of showing that, you know, he can do part of Danault's job as well as produce the offense. And you've got guys like Jake Evans, who's playing fourth line minutes and not putting up a ton of points. He's only contributed a couple of goals, but you know what? That's a couple of goals more than Danault, and he's way cheaper and younger. So, you know, it's kind of taking away from the fact that maybe they don't need these guys long-term. With all the signings they made in the offseason as well, bringing in Anderson on a long-term deal, Toffoli on a fairly long-term deal, I certainly question the future of Tatar, especially given that Tatar's more of the goal scorer, and between him and Danault. And now you get Anderson and Toffoli that are certainly goal scorers, and they're lighting it up big time this year. Now, can they keep up that pace for the duration of those contracts? Only time will tell, and that's not going to be an easy task. But at this rate, if they're playing and gelling well with their line mates, we don't have any reason to say that they can or they can't, but you have to assume that it's going to keep going well, I guess, until it doesn't, right? But at the same time, that makes them expendable. So I don't think we're going to see trades around these guys. There's been certainly a lot of talk and uncertainty around their futures, but given how things have gone lately, especially with Tatar being a healthy scratch, has brought up more people talking about it, and whether or not these two guys will indeed be extended by Montreal, or would they be traded? At this point, given where they're at in the standings, I don't see them really subtracting from their lineup and from their roster. I really don't, but it certainly creates a situation for me that I have to question whether or not either or both of these guys return next season. Given where their salary cap situation is, they do have room that they could try to get these guys under deals depending on what they're willing to accept, but they do have some young players that are going to be needing extensions here soon as well, and the cap's likely not going up. If they give them too much money in term, that's going to make it awfully hard to get Suzuki and Kotkaniemi extended, and Evans is only signed for another little while, and then you get Romanov and his ELC. It creates a situation where that's going to make things really tough. So personally, I don't see them being traded, even though there's been some talk about it lately, but I do seriously question their long-term future. I think out of the two, Danault would be more likely to not return than Tatar, but there is a possibility, in my opinion at least, that both these guys don't return, and either if they're not traded, that they depart via free agency. Maybe they're traded before free agency hits. Maybe they get a pick back for their signing rights or something to that effect. I'm not sure, but I'm just not sure that they have a future with this Habs team long term. Now, speaking of other people that's in the trade rumor mill, there's obviously Victor Mete. Let's talk about him here. Marc Bergevin addressed that today in his press conference to the media, indicating that he has absolutely no intentions of trading the young defenseman. Now, clearly Victor Mete and his agent have requested a trade, dictating the fact that they're unhappy that he hasn't been able to play a lot. He did get into a few games, didn't do too bad. It sounded there for a little while like they were going to do a bit of a rotation between Mete and Romanov and maybe Kulak or something, but after kind of doing a couple games like that, Julian's kind of gone back to wanting Kulak and Romanov in there, and Mete being the odd man out. I mean, he will get some time to play, but as I mentioned before too, they're one injury away from needing him on a full-time basis. You just never know. Like, they've been lucky that they've been fairly healthy this season, but there's still lots of games left. And if they run into any injury problems, he could become extremely important. So I understand from the fact of Bergevin not wanting to trade him, but I also understand the player's perspective that he wants to play, and it sucks sitting on the sidelines, especially when you have enough experience to prove that you really should be, a more regular player. Even if it's third pair minutes, it's something. He certainly deserves to be an NHL caliber defenseman, but Montreal Canadiens have added a lot of depth throughout their offseason acquisitions. Compared to last year's blue line, they now have Romanov in there. They added Joel Edmondson as well. Kulak's been playing well. You have Weber and Petrie. Petrie's playing insane right now. So you have a lot of guys ahead of them. It's just, one of those situations where you have a lot of depth, but like I said, it doesn't sound like Bergevin wants to move him. Let him and the agent know that he doesn't really intend to at this point. Now, he's a pending restricted free agent. Doesn't mean they won't trade him here at some point, but for right now, they intend to keep him, try to make it work, get him playing time when they can, and if things aren't going to be looking any different on that blue line, I would suspect that he will likely be moved, but maybe in the offseason, or they move somebody else in the offseason and make room for Victor Mete to be a more regular player, and a lot of that's going to depend on his play, obviously. Now, some other news that Marc Bergevin talked about today, which has been mentioned here a little bit before. It sounds like one of their top prospects, if not their very top prospect, Cole Caufield, the first-round pick from the 2019 NHL Draft, likely will be turning pro when his season with the Wisconsin Badgers comes to an end later on this spring. So it sounds like Cole Caufield will be signing with Montreal when his season comes to an end. So that's good news for Habs fans. Be interesting to see him in a pro hockey setting, to see how he will adjust and how he will do. Now, of course, Bergevin could also go on to say that he really couldn't guarantee or dictate where he was going to end up playing, because a lot of that's going to depend on salary cap situation and all that. There's a lot of factors there that they have to look at, where they can put him, where he can actually get playing time, and at the same time, you know, not disturb the cap situation. So he very well might not play at the NHL level. It's possible he could go to Laval. Hard to say where things go from there, but the fact that he's turning pro is a good sign. I mean, there won't be a lot of playing time left in the season anyways, but whatever team he joins, he very well could be available for at least a small sample of regular season and playoff hockey, depending on when that time comes that he can get into the lineup. So obviously he'll have to quarantine as well, where he's playing in the US, coming back into Canada. There's a 14-day quarantine. So from the time his season ends, he'd have to, you know, come to Canada, either go to, you know, Montreal or somewhere in that area, depending on where he's going to go. And then, of course, you know, quarantine for 2 weeks. So hard to say how much playing time he'll get. More than likely, his ELC would still slide to next year and not kick in, because he likely wouldn't get enough playing time in to activate the first year of his NHL contract. Marc Bergevin also made note today that they may be signing another prospect also currently playing in the U.S. college hockey system, 2018 third-round pick defenseman Jordan Harris, currently playing for Northeastern in his third season there. Very well could turn pro as well. That was a little bit less of a guarantee. Listening to Bergevin speak in the press conference, it sounded like he was way more confident in Caufield's ability to turn pro and sign, whereas Harris is, you know, a little bit, you know, maybe he won't, but they sounded pretty optimistic that he could be signed as well. Obviously, he would be more likely to join the Laval team if indeed he does do that, but still another interesting defensive prospect there for Montreal. Of course, they have some other guys already, you know, behind Victor Mete when it comes to defense prospects. They also have Josh Brook in the system too, so they're a pretty deep team. You know, they're a team with a very deep prospect pool, and there's other guys too that they have playing in different leagues elsewhere. You know, the last 2 or 3 drafts for Montreal has been really good, but they get a couple more of these prospects signed and get them into pro hockey to see how they can do and get ready here for their pro careers would be a big advantage too. Anytime they can get in at the end of the season just to get their feet wet and get a taste of how things are going to go, usually is a great experience for them. So we'll see how that works out. So let me know your thoughts on all the news and updates here for the Montreal Canadiens today, and we can discuss further down in the comments. And as I mentioned, look for another video here in the not too distant future, getting you up to date with all the other news on all the other teams. I just wanted to do one dedicated video here since there was so much to talk about for one specific team. Thank you very much for watching, everybody, and I'll catch you all next time.